there are some cracks in the foundation.
The Chinese triads are running this game.
Do you know what diplomacy is?
It's time to buy America once again.
It's all emotional, right? That's the weirdest part about this whole thing. All of these people trying to predict these, trying to predict where we'll be, like you said, in 6, 12, 18 months. It's like, you know, it's the gyrations of confidence, lack of confidence, confidence, lack of confidence. And it's on the X, Y, Z axis. And people are feeling this turbulence, and it's unmanageable. And so you're looking for, like I was saying, as a small business owner, you're looking for a few things to get ticked off, right? Checked off the box. One is the Ukrainian war. Let's put an end to that. Negotiate this mineral agreement. All right, great. The U.S. has rights to minerals. It's the same thing that we did in the Iraq war, right? We'll go in there. Sure, we'll get rid of a despot, a dictator. Yeah. But give us the rights to your oil. And seemingly, this is what the U.S. loves to do. Come in at the end, act like a hero, just like they did in World War II. War waging for years and years, and they come in at the end, they're like, all right, you know what? You bombed Pearl Harbor, we're in. Whether that's
most people don't know that the Soviet Union actually allowed the U.S. to march into Berlin first to look cool.
Interesting. I did not know that. Where'd you read that?
Yeah.
By the way, says a Russian. By the way,
it's in the National Review.
Dude, it's fine. I read it on Newsmax, bro. In any event, a few things we got to check off the box. Let's go through the list. So one, the Ukrainian war has to end, right? We need to negotiate some sort of settlement. The what do you call it region needs to go to Russia, and they've got to cede that land to the Russians. Ethnic Russians live there. They speak Russian. It's Russian. Give it back. All right, great.
By the way, the Russian Navy is in the Crimean Peninsula. So not recognizing that would be just sheer moronic stupidity.
Yeah. And it's funny that all the sanctions and we're going to, false flag, we're going to blow up, these natural gas pipelines that go from, I almost said the Soviet Union, that go from Russia to the greater European continent. None of it seemingly worked. Russia worked, backdoor deals with all of these countries, whether it's India, whether it's Iran, whether it's North Korea and China. Yeah. It's so funny, right? It's such a global, it almost seems redundant, but it's like, it's a global world. It's a global economy, right? And singling out a country, it's not as easy as it used to be, right? They used to be able to single out a country like North Korea, and then their economies, their economy is put on ice. But it's not as easy anymore. And especially, and I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but crypto, right? To be able to transfer, US has their own interest. They want, the US dollar to be the reserve currency, right? They want everything, including oil and stuff, right? They want that to be the currency that oil is traded in, which is a big deal, right? But so anyway, getting back to it though, you want Ukraine war to end, right? We need to negotiate. We need to come to the negotiating table with China. And that's a big, big issue because China is a communist country and they don't want to look feeble and they don't want to look weak. But as you well know, for the last 5+ years, they've had some issues with their economy, right? There are some cracks in the foundation, one of which is property, right? They're having a real estate crisis in China. They're doing their best to kind of sweep that under the rug, but I think it's very apparent. They stopped allowing people to take more than $50,000, right, out of the country. So there was
they built cities no one lives in.
Yeah, ghost cities. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's like all of us have realized over the last 20 years, right, as China has sort of made these amazing gains, these it's not linear. It's what do you call it? It's
exponential.
It is exponential, right? The gains that they've made since the 1980s. And it's like everybody can see it in their communities because there's large groups of Chinese people moving into all these upper middle class areas where there's great schools. It doesn't matter what country. It's Canada, it's Australia, it's New Zealand, it's the United States, of course. It's England, it's France. It's all of these nations that have property rights, democracies, capitalistic, and they're all trying to export their dollars from China to these countries, have babies, by the way, in these countries, and then move those babies back to China, right? With hopes that once those kids are of age to go to university, they can then go back to their country of origin, which happens to be the aforementioned, and go to university there because they're citizens, right? They were born in these countries. But my point is that
So you got the Ukraine war. What's number 2?
I think it's China, right? That's the biggest one. So Ukraine's getting checked off, right? Negotiations with China. Seems like that's turned a corner. In the news this morning, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about Beijing weighs fentanyl offer to U.S. to start trade talks, right? That's a big issue, right? They're creating these precursor chemicals. They're shipping it to Mexico. Mexico's taking those chemicals, right? Making it into fentanyl and then either putting it in illicit drugs, which are sold in the United States, or that drug in and of itself is exported to the United States and sold, right? And again, it's just destroying.
It's interesting. I knew they were doing bad stuff in Mexico. I just didn't know about these precursor chemicals.
I think they're the largest manufacturer of these precursor chemicals in the world.
Wow.
And that's one of the things that
makes sense.
You know, they know that.
And the Chinese triads are running this game in Mexico.
I think so.
As far as I understand.
Yeah. There was an amazing, what's that news outlet that used to be
Vice?
Yes. Out of Brooklyn, right? He was a Canadian guy out of Brooklyn, in tatters, by the way, financially, that company. But there's a great documentary.
But they did some cool reporting.
They do some cool reporting. It's very like hipster, right? It's very hipster.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, Chinese leader Xi Jinping, security czar, Wang Xiaohong in recent days has been inquiring about what the Trump team wants China to do when it comes to chemical ingredients used to make fentanyl. So it's again, right? They're like, all right, dude, we'll come to the negotiating table. We know that fentanyl is one of the things that you want to talk about. Just tell us what you want to do. And so again, right? The nation of China is, you know, their whole thing is, right, having control over the economy, the society. And there's this intensifying economic pain that people are feeling. And it's being exacerbated. It's being exacerbated by what Trump's doing with these tariffs. And like you and I have talked about many times before, we know people, right, that are affected by these tariffs. So, and for everybody who's watching, it's not China that pays the tariffs. Mom. It's not China that pays the tariffs, right? It's people in China who buy U.S. goods that have to pay the tariffs. It's people in America who buy cheap Chinese-made goods that have to pay the tariffs. And it's not, you know, again, it's like the secondary and tertiary effects. If you make a toy and that toy is manufactured abroad in China, and then, you know, you've got these 150% tariffs applied to the manufacturing and importation of those toys, well, when it gets here and sits at the dock, if you want to pick that stuff up and put it onto one of your trucks, you have to pay that tariff. And so as the manufacturer, there's only so much you can, you know, there's only so much pain you can absorb before you have these downstream, right, effects on your, you know, on your constituency. So it's like, you know, you walk into Target and all the things that are manufactured that are lining those shelves, right, you know, in large part, I would assume, are all manufactured in China, from both, like, you know, over-the-counter drugs to toys. Well, great. All that stuff has huge tariffs. So either the manufacturer is going to absorb it, Target's going to absorb it, right? That's why I talk about secondary, tertiary effects, or the consumer's going to absorb it. So, like, here's a quick story. This morning, my son wakes up, he rides this e-bike, and he wants this special part for his e-bike. And he says, hey, they just put out this announcement. If we don't buy it now, the price is going to double by next week. Today's Friday. So clock's ticking.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. It's great. It's great. My son is leveraging economic tariffs to his advantage to get a toy, right? A toy that he wants. I mean, how could you get a better lesson in economics at the age of 10 than that?
Pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, when we went to the e-bike store, I said, do we have to worry about the prices rising? Because I'm not buying him this bike right now. He's got to earn it. He's got to get the grades. Then he's got to save the money so he can contribute his half to buying the bike. And then he'll get the bike this summer. But, the tariffs will be in effect by then. They said, oh, don't worry. Our bikes are made in Taiwan.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Dude, you know what? All good bikes are made in Taiwan. I don't know if you know that.
And then somehow magically that's not China and we don't have to worry about tariffs there.
Well, yeah, it's not China
Fantastic.
yet. It's not China. Put a comma after that. It's not China yet.
Just shows you how this is all just made up stuff. It's a bunch of nonsense.
Well, the
Ukraine war ends, the tariffs are reduced. I doubt they go away, but there will be enormous reductions. And then the trifecta, the last of the Mohicans, is getting that interest rate, right?
Bingo.
The symbolic federal funds rate to come down even by a quarter point, just showing that willingness, showing that pivot from the Fed.
Yeah.
Right. And showing the markets. And that's not just the US market, but the global market.
Yeah.
That liquidity is here. It's available. It's ready to go. Get bullish.
That's right. That's right. Those are the three. Waiting for. Those are the three things, right? Again, those are the three things. I think it's pretty darn simple. And as a small business owner, those are the things that you're looking for in the economy. You're sitting on the toilet and you're reading the front page of the Wall Street Journal and you're like, okay, great. Ukraine war, China's negotiating, and it looks like rates are going to come down. And so I don't know if everybody gets their way, and it sounds like we're not talking about children here, right? We're talking about the heads of, the most powerful nations in the world coming together. Again, and you taught me this, or maybe your wife taught me this. She was like, do you know what diplomacy is? And I was like, do you remember her talking about this?
No.
This is brilliant. This is something your wife said, who's an attorney.
I do listen to her, though.
I listen to her, too, even when she's tough on me on vacation.
Well deserved.
She's kind of got that big sister energy. You know what I mean? Like, you better like
go. Mama bear. Like a mama bear.
Yeah,
Stop
a little
acting
bit.
Like a child.
Yeah. A little bit. She got that mama bear energy. But she said something interesting. She negotiates for a living with big companies, right? Large publicly traded companies. She negotiates with them. She knows their antics, right? She knows they come in the room and they flail their arms. I'm not doing this. And then they leave and then they come back.
Well, the opposite. She's representing the large publicly traded companies, and it's the plaintiff's attorneys that are the ones flailing their arms.
True.
And threatening things.
But I'm just saying that, she understands the antics of negotiation and diplomacy. Oh, yeah. And one of the most interesting things she said, she goes, you know what diplomacy is? I said, no. What is it? She says, in a negotiation, diplomacy is when two parties come together, right? And they're able to negotiate the end of something, right? An agreement is made. And both are willing to leave the negotiating table with less than they wanted originally. That's diplomacy. I think, dude, that's the best way to describe what's going on today, which is you've got, these aren't petulant children coming together to negotiate, something. These are, two of the most powerful nations in the world saying, you know what? Listen, we don't want to look foolish to our, again, Trump doesn't want to look foolish. That's a big thing. But Xi Jinping doesn't want to look foolish either, right?
No.
He can't. No. He can't.
He wants to come out a winner. He wants to win in some.
Right. He banned, what's that bear that loves honey? Winnie the Pooh. Somebody made a comment Bert Kreischer. Somebody said that Xi Jinping, I kid you not, somebody said Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh. So he banned Winnie the Pooh. That's his stranglehold on the economy. Yeah. Which is fucking wild.
There's a great anecdote about this whole diplomacy and negotiating in that super popular TV show the audience probably loves, Succession.
Is that where the
old
is
man
that where the guy wants to be an Asian woman?
No. That's White Lotus.
Got it. Duly noted.
Very close.
Duly
Yeah,
noted.
Succession is where it's kind of like the Murdoch family, sort of. It's a spoof on the Murdoch family, and the patriarch is this old man, and his sons are all and his daughter are vying for to be the next CEO of this business.
Got it. Okay.
But he's kind of a narcissistic asshole, and he's pitting them all against each other.
Wait,
And being a
me
dick.
or this character?
Well, yeah, you'd like that. But so he's in a negotiation over buying some company, and his son is sitting there, and the guy agrees to the terms and walks out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And the son looks at the dad and says, "Dad, we killed it. Amazing." And he goes, "What are you fucking talking about? What did we kill?" And the guy goes, "We got exactly what we wanted." And he goes, "I'm looking at him right now, and he's fucking smiling." He goes, "So what? We got the price." He goes, "He's fucking smiling. That means we got fucked in the ass." He goes, "I want you to go out there and walk him to the elevator and tell him 19 instead of whatever it was, 34 or something." He's like, "Dad, we already said yes." He goes, "I don't care. Go walk him to the elevator and say 19. He can't walk away smiling.
Interesting. And
that was
thing,
a cool,
right?
cool scene from that show.
Right. And that's what's going on today, right? Both Trump and Xi Jinping can't look foolish. They can't see the other one walking away smiling. But they're going to figure it out.
And Jerome Powell feels the same way, right? He wants to win in some way. He doesn't want to be told what to do by Trump every single day.
You think he cares?
So Trump already gave him one thing. He said, "Look, you got negative 0.3 GDP." A backwards looking metric, by the way, that means absolutely fucking nothing to the stock market. This is
right.
old news, discounted.
Well, you should explain it, right? Because the GDP numbers, right? It's a window to the past, right? But the stock market
tells you nothing about the future.
That's right. Right. But the stock market
who wants to drive in the rear view mirror. But the stock market tells us what's going to happen. It's not perfect, but it tells us what's going to happen in the next 6, 12, 18 months.
Yeah.
With a good amount of accuracy. And right now, right, you've got a GDP number that was deflated a little bit by a very high number of by a huge percentage gain in the number of imports that we made in the first quarter. And that was driven by this tariff nonsense. It can easily then bounce backwards, right? Bounce right back if some of this pressure goes away. Mm-hmm. And you'll get a higher than you expected GDP number later on, right? Maybe in the second quarter. And so the GDP number is just one piece of evidence that Trump is bringing to Powell's doorstep while he sort of plays around with him in front of the camera. But he's really taken his rhetoric down. He is not saying anything bombastic like, "I'm going to fire you, you're done here." He's really trying to influence him. That's really all he's doing, whether it's on Truth Social or in the media on camera. And Powell wants to win. So Powell's getting, he got his first little nugget. There's your GDP report. And today, did you get a jobs report that supports that? Probably not.
Yeah, not really.
But the question is, hey, Jerome, do you want to wait for the next shoe to drop, or do you want to help everybody out? And help
a brother
than later,
out.
He'll come to that. Oh, help a lot of brothers out.
Help a lot of brothers out. So,
help 8 billion brothers out.
All right, so here, let's end it here, but I want to ask you a question and then we can wrap. Let's say Jerome Powell caves and he lowers rates. Let's say we get a quarter point, we get a half point. Aggressive would be a half point, right?
Very.
Okay. So let's say we get a half point, which, makes everybody happy. I think what a lot of small business owners want to understand is Fed funds rate gets lowered. That's the rate at which banks borrow money overnight from, right? So how does that affect or not long-term rates? How does that affect the cost of capital to buy a car, the cost of capital to buy a house?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. What does that do?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't do anything, right? It does not affect long-term rates because long-term rates are set by the market.
Mm-hmm.
And long-term rates are a function of expectations about inflation, long-term economic growth, right? And also, let's not forget, just like the stock market, people forget that it's a market, supply and demand.
That's right.
And what's been happening lately? There's no question about it. The demand for our long-term treasuries has been affected by the negotiations over tariffs. And foreign nations have been withdrawing from the US Treasury market just to spite us. And that could be China, it could be Europe, right? You see that. Less demand for our treasuries, right, was causing rates to pop up. And lately they've been trending down. Today they're back up a little bit. But what's going to happen when those rates come down? I think you can imagine that additional liquidity, that support from the Fed for the economy is going to increase confidence in the US economy. Because again, we didn't talk about the Fed moving by itself. We said there are three pieces to this that are important, right? Our status as a global leader, especially in Europe, will be cemented by a peace in Ukraine and Russia, right? Our global dominance is cemented by being able to negotiate with China over these tariffs. And then finally, right, this is just piece number 3, is that little bit of liquidity, that little kick in the butt for the stock market and the economy is the Jerome Powell piece. Mm-hmm. So it's not all by itself. It comes in a trifecta, and all of that tells the world it's time to buy America once again. And that includes treasuries. And what happens when demand for treasuries goes up on the long end? What'll happen is you buy more, and as demand goes up, the price goes up and yields come down. Okay. Right? So treasuries work inversely. The more the price goes up, the more the yield goes down.
That's right.
If prices go down, the yield goes up. And so it's a complicated ecosystem, but I think that's where we're going. And all of that will play with the US dollar. How the dollar will react to that, we'll see. That's not necessarily something small business owners are too concerned with right now, right? The dollar has weakened against the euro. It could easily pop back up as all of these things take place. I'm going to go to Europe this summer, so I care what the pound sterling is doing. But most people, this is not their primary concern.
Well, there you have it. Some respite for the small business owner. There's help on the way, right? There's some signs of some green shoots. And that kind of like Warren Buffett says, right? This is not time to panic, right? There's, if you have a pullback, if you have a little bit of discomfort, it's short-lived. We're not heading to, toward a recession. The news outlets need to sell advertising. So in this world that we live in with a 24-hour news cycle, they need to sell death and doom and gloom, right? Because that's what gets clicks, which ultimately gets CPMs, right? And that's how they.
And we know some of you guys, some of you guys and gals out there, the small business owners, you guys have been holding off on those major purchases, those inventory buys. You've been holding off on investing in materials for that next project. Stop waiting, right? You've got America's favorite small business lender right here.
Yeah. I think if you're a small business owner and you're looking for quick access to capital, hire people, buy equipment, buy more supplies, there couldn't be a better time to do it. And with Cardiff, there isn't a better lender. We're talking apply in minutes, funding same day, flexible solutions that fit your budget and your timeline. Get access today, right? Click the link now. Right? That's the message. See you guys next time.